Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 24th hour. I have a wonderful guest for you today, Sal Rachele, and Mark and I were introduced to his teachings probably many years ago. And I read something in one of his books, and he was talking about how Jesus, who in the higher realms, they refer to as Sananda, sometimes, or Lord Sananda, one of his greatest contributions was A Course in Miracles. And I found that so interesting. And Sal's website is salrachele.com. And he's the author of 5 books and has been a pioneer in human potential, that field, for over 40 years. So his latest book that I absolutely love, oh my gosh, The Mystery of Time, is now out. And we're going to talk about the illusion of time, the linear view of time, also, that we're all familiar with here. So I'm so glad to have him on the 24th hour. Sal, welcome.
Well, it's great to be here.
I was telling Sal before we went on the air here that there has been such a polarization, and there's so many things going on right now. And one of Sal's books, incidentally, you all, is Earth Changes. And it talks about things that are going to be going on and have been going on now between 2017 and 2030. So much has been going on that I was asking Sal to address that too. And Sal, wherever you feel inspired to go first.
So welcome, everyone.
Yay.
And it's good to be here. And let's start with the world situation. We are in the time known as apocalypse. Apocalypse literally means a time of revelation, a revealing of all that has been hidden. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right. Right.
And we're certainly seeing all of those conditions as we look around the world today.
Yes.
The good would be all of the new technologies for personal growth, such as timeline healing, the one brought by my guides, the Arcturians, and lots of people waking up, growing exponentially, healing their past emotional and mental issues, beliefs, much more quickly than those of us did back in the day.
Right.
Just as we did it much more quickly than previous generations.
Right.
So basically, when you are growing, you're going to have what some would call a backlash, triggering of that which needs healing. And that's what we're seeing in the world. Whether you support our current president here in the US or not, his election is the result of a tiny awakening among people who are fed up with the status quo.
Right.
The other candidate essentially represented the status quo, whether you believe in her policies or not. It's ultimately irrelevant. Yeah, because the only thing that's relevant is expansion of consciousness. Everything else is part of the show. It's part of the drama,
yes.
The theater.
Yes. And that's exactly right. The show, we're watching the drama, we're watching the theater, right?
So, how do you stay out of the matrix? How do you get out of this drama? Well, first, you have to realize it's just a drama.
Right.
And you're a character in the drama. And then realize that God's love is the higher reality here.
Yes.
So, what do you want to send to Trump and Putin and all the other leaders? Unconditional love and compassion. They're
Amen.
going to do a much better job if they're receiving love and support instead of hatred. Doesn't mean you agree with their values or their policies. Let's face it, all of the politicians are looking out for themselves
Yes.
and their buddies. You know, we have the best government money can buy.
Yeah. Well said.
Uh, so, so really, it's about love. It's about unconditional love. It's about recognizing that every politician is a child of God, some of them behaving very badly, but still a child of God and innocent from a higher perspective. Now, we know that from a human perspective, there's some atrocious behavior, people financing wars, killing women and children in Yemen or Palestine or wherever, supporting corrupt governments like the corrupt president of Ukraine, etc. We could go on and on.
Right.
But our job is not to get caught up in that. You to see it, well, okay, these leaders are a reflection of the unresolved issues in our own consciousness. So we need to heal our own consciousness.
Right.
We need to, as Michael Jackson would say, look at the man in the mirror or the woman in the mirror
Yes.
and start with our own consciousness. Now, this is nothing new. This has been said by teachers throughout history,
Right.
but it still bears repeating.
Right. Right. And Sal, can you talk a little bit about um, the from the higher perspective, as we're doing here, from Trump representing this change and awakening versus maybe Clinton in the status quo. Just elaborate a little bit. I know we don't want to get too stuck on the politics of it, but I think from a broader picture, it's important
Well,
to
I think people,
recognize,
I think people are desperate.
Yeah.
Not everybody, but a lot of people know that their lives are going around in circles like a hamster on a wheel,
Sure.
the rat race, as
Sure.
it's often called.
Sure.
And the standard of living is not going up for the majority of people. So I once said, paraphrasing someone else, most Americans are too fat and happy to revolt, but there is an inner revolt happening, an inner revolution. And so I think that people said, you know what? This is supposed to be government of, by, and for the people, but it has become government of, by, and for the rich. And
Yes.
they saw that Clinton was making 500,000 for a half-hour speech, and this is not a person who represents me. Now, on the other hand, Trump doesn't really represent the ordinary person either. He's beholden to his buddies in business. He's a businessman. He's
Mm-hmm.
going to do what's good for business, his business, and his buddies. But he is a maverick. He doesn't always go along with what the so called cabal or elite want. Sometimes he does. Appointing, appointing John Bolton is the epitome of that.
Okay.
The man who never met a war he didn't like.
Okay.
So, we've gone from total darkness to a little glimmer of light within the darkness as far as the political scene goes.
Okay.
Uh,
We'll take what we can get.
right. But it's a sign. It's a sign that there is an awakening happening.
Sure.
Now, a real awakening would allow for a third party, such as independents or libertarians or Green Party or something like that. And we're a long way from there.
Yes, unfortunately. Oh,
However, sometimes people need a crisis in order to change. And that's what we're headed for. There's no way around it. It can be a great opportunity to grow, or it can be a major disaster, depending on how you look at it. But I give the present economic system at most 5 more years
okay.
before it's unrecognizable. And of course, the conservatives will say it's due to the uncontrolled debt. The liberals will say it's due to the bankers and the corporations. And they're both right to some degree.
Okay.
But the real truth is that it's about a change in consciousness. We have changed our consciousness enough that we're starting to trigger these major shifts.
Right. Right.
So I want to pause for a second here and just see if we're on the same page.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I find that everything like we said earlier, it's so polarized that it's very helpful to back up the lens and look from the bigger picture. And I think what you said earlier is so important. When I'm a student of the course of A Course in Miracles for many years, I found myself now in a teaching role for a number of years. And it really is about what the Course calls going above the battleground.
So let's talk about A Course in Miracles.
Let's do it.
So I've been a student, well, I was a student of Course for about 20 years.
Okay.
But I still refer to it on occasion. It's not perfect. No written teaching is, because
Sure.
words can only point to the truth. And there's some parts that are misinterpreted. And everything looks separate, but it's not. The non-locality principle of quantum physics proves there's no separation.
Right.
They don't use the religious terms that many people use. They wouldn't say we're all one with God, but they call it non-locality, and
Right.
it's proven in a laboratory. So we are one. There's no such thing as solid outer reality. We are the enlightened teachers throughout history. We are the distant galaxy. It's all inside our one mind, and we are individualized expressions of that one mind. So this is what A Course in Miracles is saying. It's also saying it's time to put away guilt forever. There's
Yes,
nothing,
I
nothing
agree.
to feel guilty about. We are actors on a stage, some of us heroes, some of us villains, you know,
Right.
and maybe we were a villain in a past life, and in this life we're a hero, or vice versa. So it's all a drama. It's about awakening. Awakening
Yes.
from the dream of duality, the dream of separation. The belief in separation from God is the cause of all misery and suffering, period. No exceptions.
I agree
There may
with that.
be secondary corollaries to the main belief, such as I must defend myself, that lesson in the course. If I defend myself, I am attacked.
Right.
Well, if you believe in attack, then you believe in building up armaments, spending trillions of dollars on useless weapons because of this fear that little tiny self is afraid. Belief in separation. Very
Right.
simple.
Right. Right. And then what is one of the things that you teach to help people heal that belief in separation?
Well, as mentioned in the Mystery of Time book, the whole second half talks about timeline healing, which is a technology that was brought to Earth by my guides, the Arcturians,
Right.
about 10 years ago. And we've just added a level 3 to the timeline healing certification training.
Okay.
What is timeline healing? It's the ability to go back in time and change your experience of what happened,
Mm.
to give a healing to your past selves, which does not violate the laws of time and space unless you try to force your will on someone else or violate a time paradox.
Mm-hmm.
But we have safeguards, so this doesn't happen, even if it's possible for it to happen. But it changes your experience of the past, and as a result, you create a new timeline. You're no longer in the old timeline after you go through the timeline healing process.
Right. Fantastic. I wanted to read something from your book, The Mystery of Time. Um, I was talking about going above the battleground, kind of, Jesus is be in the world, but not of it, and how we
Precisely.
can look at things differently. You say on page 18 of your book, another related idea is the perception that you have a little self or ego personality that is walking on the trail down below, while your higher self or higher dimensional perception is watching from the treetop. When you see a drama unfolding down below, you have the ability to remain detached and calm, simply observing the fracas and confusion from on high rather than identifying with it. This is called non-attachment or freedom from duality. I love that.
Yes, and a lot of people don't understand that. They think it means denying the world or escaping the world or
Right?
pretending it's not real or, oh,
Right.
that's just their drama. They created it. No, it's about having love and compassion, feeling the suffering, experiencing the suffering of the world, but not identifying with it. It's not who we are. It's a
Right.
drama, it's a play.
That's
And
right.
this idea of not identifying with it is our freedom. We're no
Yes.
longer identified with this little character that we call the ego, with its dreams of disaster, etc., as it's perfect words from the course.
Right. Right.
So we identify with our higher self,
Yeah.
the all wise, all loving, all knowing self, divine I am presence, whatever you want to call it, that is our true identity. You identify with truth, not illusion.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's almost like you quote physicist Julian Barber and you say, physicist Julian Barber has proposed a theory that what we call outer life is merely a very sophisticated version of a movie being run through a projector. In other words, life is a series of stills that blink on and off at a very high speed, perhaps a billion times per second, giving the illusion of movement. All movement is controlled by consciousness. According to Barber, the only thing that actually moves is your state of awareness. And I think that's so interesting because I think physicists and scientists are catching up with mystics in a way, that really recognizing that there is nothing outside.
Yes. And another principle that I mentioned in the book is the holographic principle. And one of the people say, well, okay, it's a 2D surface that's made to look like 3D. Well, that's the definition of a hologram. But a more important part of a hologram is that the whole is contained within the parts. And scientist Nassim Haramein came up with an idea that the entire universe exists inside every proton.
Mm.
Now, think about that for a moment.
Right.
The kingdom of heaven is within. That's the religious way of saying it. The universe is within, is the scientific way of saying it.
Yes.
And this is proving that. It's been mathematically proven. And he even won an award in a prestigious scientific journal for his paper. So even mainstream scientists are starting to wake up to this.
Yes.
So again, more proof that we are one.
Absolutely. And you know what? Can you give an example maybe of how you teach people or help people to look at things that way, and then what that would do in their everyday experience, how they would feel to have that, to practice being detached. I know from my teachings in A Course in Miracles is that, and we can use whatever, people can use whatever terms they want. And the Course would say, if you're in the Holy Spirit mind, you're able to recognize the illusion and see that we're not really separate. The ego mind is the figure in the dream and believes the drama is real. So I know
before we get to that point, we have to take people where they are. And so we dive into the drama and look at how you can see it differently. And timeline healing goes back to traumas that occurred in early childhood or in past lifetimes. Maybe your parents beat you when you were little, or told you you're a failure, you'll never amount to anything. And so we do some real therapy to heal these things. We work with the emotions, the negative core beliefs. We do breathing, meditation. But the biggest thing we do is get a person to love the wounded self.
Mm.
The key to all healing is unconditional love.
Yes.
So, or we could say God's love coming through us to the part of the self that feels abandoned or hurt, rejected, whatever. So we do use therapy, and that's where people need to start, because it's pretty hard to just jump to the top of the mountain where we see everything's an illusion except God's love.
Right.
When your husband or wife is screaming at you and you can't pay the bills and your son is hooked on drugs.
Yes, I call them the steps. You're right, Sal. So it's there's such a crossover between people believing in duality and slowly awakening to like semi-duality. Yes, before you get to the awareness of non-duality and the illusion, it is so helpful. And another thing that I teach too is that we're normal here. We do the normal things, when we're sick, we do what we need to do to feel better physically, right? When we have some psychological
parable, before enlightenment, carry water and chop wood. After enlightenment, carry water and chop wood. It's
Yes.
just that you're doing it with a different state of consciousness. The first monk is afraid he's not going to have enough wood to stay warm for the winter or enough water, and he's worried about the future. The second monk is at peace, and he's just doing what he needs to do to take care of the body. It's no
Right.
big deal.
Right. It's not that you're necessarily doing anything differently. It's how you're looking at it now while you're doing it.
Right. This is the in the world, but not of the world. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another thing that brings up an interesting point because there's a school of thought, and this is what's so confusing when one understands that the world is an illusion. We're not asked to deny the body; we're denying the ego's interpretation and what the ego puts as importance that the body on the body in favor of how we can look at the body differently and use it lovingly. And
It's a
so
temple.
so we're not necessarily running out and being spiritual and changing all our roles and changing all our relationships, but rather just looking at them differently, you know?
Yes, of course. So it is about, again, perception. And as long as we perceive ourselves as separate, we will believe that there are things outside of ourselves that can attack us, whether it's a taxman or a military or a president or a Congress or a church or an in-law.
Yeah. And everybody listening can relate to one or all of those things, right? Sal, why are we bombarded? I know we're bombarded with so many different things all the time here. Eventually, you have to smile, not smiling at disaster, not smiling at but smiling at what we have made up here when we're.
Well, we have to see the absurdity of it. We live in an economic system that is the exact opposite of higher spiritual principles.
Okay.
Our economy does not grow unless more and more people buy more and more things because they believe they're lacking inside. And therefore, I need this and this and this and this and this in order to be happy. Then the economy grows. So, what happens if we realize that we are whole, complete beings, just as we are, that the kingdom of heaven is within? Then we realize 90% of this stuff, we don't really need it. We don't need to keep destroying the environment, fighting over oil or whatever.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So in that
Absolutely.
sense, we can laugh at our silliness.
Right. Absolutely. Well said. And, that brings me to something I wanted to ask you about. You've been involved in intentional communities and things like that. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit. First of all, if you could tell the viewers a little bit about your guides and your information, and then maybe what you're seeing or they're seeing going forward.
Well, I just read something the other day or heard something the other day called communitarianism.
Really? I haven't heard that term. Okay.
It's not communism. It's
Right.
not about controlling anybody like socialists, communists, capitalists. There's always somebody in control, right?
Right.
This is about true community, co-creating,
Okay.
where a group of people come together and say, what can we create together? And, certain people will take certain roles, and a person who's good at administration will do the administrating. A person who's good at gardening will do the gardening,
Right.
etc. But it's not like one is more valuable than the other. A lawyer may be worth the same amount as a farmer. I think a farmer is probably worth more than a lawyer in reality, but
because we need food. Yeah.
So it's like everybody realizes their intrinsic worth and that we are coming together to co-create something. And there's systems called dynamic governance and things like that, that are new political economic models, which are a little complicated. We won't get into them today.
Okay.
But it's the way of the future.
Yeah.
And there are a few communities now that are working reasonably well for people. There's a directory, ic.org.
Okay.
ic.org.
Okay.
That lists over 1,000 intentional communities around the world.
Wow. What a great resource.
I haven't met a perfect one. There's problems with all of them.
Okay.
But some of them are working better than others, of course.
Right. Wow. And how big are these usually, these intentional communities? Or do they have
they can vary from 6 to 1,000 people.
Okay.
The Domenher community in Italy is about 500 residents and another 500 people around the world. I spent 3 months there one time.
Oh,
it wasn't
goodness.
for me.
Okay.
But they had a lot of good things and some problems.
Okay.
There's Findhorn in Scotland. There's Oroville in India. The Farm in Tennessee.
Right.
They all have their problems, but it's worth studying what's working and what's not. Sure. Because our present economic system is not going to last too much longer. By the year 2025, it'll be unrecognizable.
Yes. And what are your guides saying is one of maybe the dominant timelines of what's going to happen with the economic system?
Well, the dominant timeline is that there's going to be a collapse.
Right.
It's inevitable. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yes.
The when is tricky.
Sure.
Because of free will. My guides and many, many other guides of other channels have been predicting it would happen more quickly than it's been happening. It's been like a slow motion train wreck. You can see the evidence of it, of course, with what's happening in the stock market. The market has no relation to reality. It's a psychological casino.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
You have companies that if there was justice in the world, they would fall apart, and yet the stock keeps getting driven up higher and higher. They don't have good fundamentals. Their investments are not good. Their debt is horrible. And yet they keep going up in value because it's all speculation. Somebody's going to make money. Cryptocurrencies have done exactly what I predicted. Exactly.
Okay. And tell us about that.
Well, I predicted they'd go up close to 20,000 and then they'd start dropping and they go back to around between 4,000 and 6,000 and start vacillating.
Okay.
And that's what they've been doing. They don't really produce anything of real value. It's speculation.
Okay.
You get in at the right time, you get out at the right time, you make money. That's it.
Right. I wonder if you could speak to what practical things people can do to get through the economic transition that's coming.
Number one is to acquire real estate in the country where you can grow your own food, collect your own water or drill for your own water.
Okay.
Produce your own power, solar, wind, hydro.
Okay.
And become less and less dependent on the system. Learn how to eat less and eat better.
Okay.
Do some type of exercise that feels good to your body.
Okay.
Resist the temptation to take pills for your ills. Maybe 10% of all prescription medications actually help, or in some cases are lifesavers.
Right.
But 90% is probably unnecessary or dangerous.
I think
Sorry, I have to look around for hidden cameras to see if the farm industry's listening.
right, right. We're in the surveillance state, Sal.
You know, a bunch of holistic doctors were suicided
Yeah.
or murdered.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really sad, and so many of these things, it's just unpleasant to recognize in this mass illusion here that these things are going on. But as you were talking about, and your work has been about the awakening and people really waking up not only to what's going on within the dream, but we're eventually going to wake up from the dream. But when we have these big transitions going on, as you just addressed so well in my question, I'm wondering what you would say for people who, let's say, they're not in a position right now to be off the grid or to kind of engage in some of the wonderful things that you've mentioned that I know people are doing just in their
Yes.
everyday lives. It's to focus, like you said earlier, on the higher self. And
Well, first of all, let's use a basic truth.
okay.
In order to get to where you want to be, you have to start where you are. That's
Nice.
about as basic as it gets.
Right.
But many people are not willing to start where they are. They're trying to delude themselves into thinking they're somewhere they are not.
Okay.
So start with what you have right now. Maybe you have a job you don't like, a family you fight with, creditors you fight with, a house that leaks, etc. So
Right.
start there.
Okay.
Start by accepting the what is. Doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you
Okay.
want it to stay that way, but you accept it. This is where I am in my life. I fight with my spouse. My kids don't respect me, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So you start there and then say, what is the one thing I can do today? I can be present. I can be
Ah,
more
very good.
aware.
Very
I
good.
can I can breathe. I can feel the anger before it explodes and just be with it and breathe through it. Because if you breathe through your feelings, they tend to dissipate. They don't, it's when you stuff them down and deny them or fight with them,
Yeah.
then they get stronger. Oh, I shouldn't be angry. What's wrong with me? You know, that's a
Right.
guaranteed formula for staying stuck.
Yes.
So you
Absolutely.
accept, oh, I have anger. Not I am angry. No, you don't say I am angry. Say I feel angry, because you're not wanting to identify with the feeling, but you're wanting to be present with it. Right there in front of you is the anger or the fear or the sadness or whatever it is. And just be with it, be 100% present. From
Right.
that place, then what do I desire to create? I want health, happiness, and prosperity, or whatever.
Right.
So that's your starting point.
Okay.
Then you're no longer fighting with yourself, and you have the ability to go deeper into the kingdom within, the higher self. And the higher self knows what to do about the unpaid bills, the teenager on drugs, the tax man, or whatever.
Right. Right. Absolutely. I always talk about the quiet answer within and the quiet center. And one of the most challenging things, I think, for a lot of my clients is we decide first what we think we want. And then we say, oh, and now I'm going to give that over instead of how do we always know what's best? We don't even know sometimes unconsciously that we're deciding first what we think we want. And then we're like, oh, but I'm going to be in the moment instead of maybe being in that eternal now, right? And that quiet center, looking at what has upset us, which you just said, like looking at it and recognizing it, right?
And I think knowing who we are is the real key. If we know that we are children of God, that God is within, then what do we really need from this world? Maybe temporarily a little food, clothing, shelter, the ability to love, to co-create with others. That's pretty much it.
Right.
If you need more, then it's there. If I
Right.
need an airplane to get to another country to teach a workshop, then yeah, that can be created. But this constant more, trying to satisfy this empty hole called the ego, that's where the problem is. So we have to start by looking directly at the problem. The problem is a misperception about who we are. As A Course in Miracles says, let me recognize the problems so it can be solved. And the only problem is separation.
That's it. Yep. I agree. Oh my gosh. Well said, Sal. I just want to thank you so much for your time today. There are so many things we could talk about and so many things to discuss. And I want to direct everyone again to salrakelly.com. We'll have the information for them. And all
the spelling is up above on your screen.
Say that again?
The spelling is up above on your screen. There's one L in my last name.
That's right. Yeah. And we'll put this up for people too when we do this, put this video out.
We do have a workshop coming up. It's an online workshop.
Okay.
It's Timeline Healing Level 1. Open to anyone who's sincere about working on themselves, open to therapists, healers who want to be more effective. Awesome. And it's 4 Saturdays in January, starting, I believe, the 12th.
Okay.
I believe it's the 12th.
Okay.
And in the West, it's from 8 a.m. to noon. In the East, it's from 11 till 3. And a lot of people are doing this from Europe. So it's in the late afternoon or early evening in Europe.
Okay.
Well, of course, I'm available for private sessions. There is a bit of a wait to get a spot, but it's not a long wait.
Okay. And I want to say something about your sessions, Sal, because both Mark, my husband, and I have had one. And for the viewers out there, it's very interesting how Sal's guides can tap into where you are, where your mind is, and the ladder, so to speak, of the consciousness level, and where your body is in relation to where the earth is vibrating. And I've noticed in my own life, obviously we take care of the body while we are seemingly here. And, certain foods don't agree with us, or certain things that maybe we don't know we could do better or differently that will help us feel better here while we're on this path to awakenings. I want to thank you so much again for joining us here on the 24th hour. It's such good information, and just remembering for everybody to kind of look at things from a higher perspective, if you can.
Well, it's been a pleasure being here.
Oh, thank you so much. I just wanted to say that we love all of you from the 24th hour here. We're all in this together, and we all fell asleep together. We're all going to awaken together. And anything we do here, that can reflect the love instead of fear is really a good goal to aspire to. So I want to say, be well, and blessings to you all. We'll see you next time.